Right, this is dispositional explanations for obedience. So it's all about the question, is obedience down to your personality, your disposition, or down to the situation that you find yourself in? If you support the dispositional explanation, you think it's actually your obedience is mainly because you have that kind of personality, rather than you've found yourself in a situation which causes you to obey. So the person that's really investigated this is someone called Adorno, and what he looked at was something called authoritarianism. So he designed his own scale. So let me talk you through what he actually did. He was investigating obedience, and he took 2,000 middle-class white Americans, and they developed something called the F scale, which is looking for potential for fascism. So it's actually a questionnaire, and what I've actually done is put it onto Edmodo, this link, which is a page where you can actually take the F scale, and you'll see this is some of the questions from it. And hopefully you can see more or less. It's got the question and then a series of, you have to agree or disagree with it. So I would invite you at this point to pause the video and go onto that website and just have a go at doing a few of those, so that you can see a little bit about what the questions are like on this F scale before you continue. Okay, so going back to Adorno, what he actually found in the end was a strong correlation between authoritarianism and prejudice. And what he found was that people who were authoritarian showed respect to authority, i.e. obedience, so that's where this comes in. He found that those who were authoritarian were also really obedient. He found that they also saw things really in black and white, and they looked down on people who they thought to be weaker than themselves. And what he actually concluded was that basically people with an authoritarian personality tend to be obedient to authority. That's the key conclusion that we're really interested in, because what he's done is he's managed to link a dispositional factor, something in people's personalities, with obedience. He also found these other things which, to be thorough and detailed, we should know about. These kinds of people tend to dislike people weaker than them. They tend to have conventional attitudes to sex, race and gender, things like homophobia and that sort of thing. When I say conventional, I really mean traditional. They think that society is going down the drain and that it needs to be kind of rescued and brought back, and that to do that you need to have traditional strong values. And they also were quite inflexible kind of people, and they saw things in right and wrong, very black and white. It is either right or it's wrong. They didn't tend to see things in shades of grey like many people do, see the subtleties and nuances. It's either black or it's white. So that's a bit more detail about what authoritarianism actually is. So that was Adorno's study, and that's basically for this section of the course. That is your AO1, your description. That's what you need to know about. You need to be confident describing and talking about this particular study. So again, before you carry on, I suggest you pause the video and complete yourself a key study sheet for this particular study. So putting in the aims, which were to investigate the causes of obedience, the procedures using the F scale sample. There's your findings, the strong correlation between authoritarianism and prejudice, and that was what he concluded. So please pause the video at this point and complete yourself a key study worksheet. Right, now he also, Adorno, wanted to investigate where it comes from, so he looked at parenting style, and he found that these were the different features of parenting style that were more likely to lead to authoritarianism. So if when they were younger their parents had been really strict, they'd expected absolute loyalty and had impossibly high standards, and when they'd done something not very well, they'd been criticised, that kind of thing. So that was what tended to lead to authoritarianism in those children when they grew up. And what happened was that they can't be resentful to their parents or kind of express their frustration, so they would displace that onto weaker people and despise weaker people. Right, now this is thinking now about evaluation of Adorno's study. So the key problems here are that the F scale is susceptible to acquiescence bias. If you go back to your F scale, which you might still have open, you might not, I'll bring it up here so you can see it. If you go back to your F scale, you can see we've got the same kinds of things all the way down. The agree strongly, it's all in the same, it's all set up in exactly the same way, so that if what you did was went down and ticked the same one every time, which as we know people tend to do on interviews, on questionnaires rather, what happens was you could be rated as really strongly authoritarian. So that's, if you remember from research methods, that's what we call acquiescence bias. You're more likely to agree to statements that are given to you. Equally, you're more likely, response bias, to go down and just tick the same thing every time just to get the thing over with. So that's the problem with the F scale, and they could have mixed it up a bit by kind of changing where the statements were and so on, but they didn't. The other problem was they gave their participants first this questionnaire, they found out what their scores were, and then they interviewed them, knowing what the study was looking for. So it wasn't a blind study, and this is quite a problem, because what you might get in there is quite bad interviewer bias, because they know that someone's scored high on authoritarian characteristics. They know that that's what the study is looking for, is a link between authoritarianism and kind of childhood experiences and obedience. So actually what they could easily have been doing is subconsciously guiding their participants towards a particular response, and kind of maybe helping them to over exaggerate how strict their parents were and so on. So that's the second problem. The other problem is it's not a causation. So what we've got is two correlations, basically. You've got the link between obedience and authoritarianism. It's only a correlation, so it doesn't say necessarily that that authoritarianism causes obedience. It doesn't necessarily equally say that early childhood causes authoritarianism. All we've got is a link, so it might be a third factor, something else causing the two of those. So that is quite a key problem with this area. And then what we've got, other evaluation issues to think about. It has been supported by Milgram and Elms, who found the same thing. And there are individual personality issues. While it's good to know about them, it doesn't really explain why millions of people in Nazi Germany all obeyed. So that's a big problem with any kind of dispositional explanation, is that actually it's probably better explained in terms of social factors and social identity, because if it is a dispositional thing, a personality thing as to why people obey, then actually you wouldn't expect millions of people all to do it, because everyone's got different personalities. So that's quite a big issue with this. And then the last thing actually is another problem with the F scale, which probably could have gone on the previous slide with problems with this study, but it's politically biased. So it's just looking at right-wing politics. It's ignoring left-wing authoritarianism completely, which is another thing, which is equally authoritarian. So that's quite a big problem with these issues. So that is this section of the course. So please do make some notes, read up, be confident with that Adorno study, and I've also put some really interesting clips into the library in Edmodo, which I'll post with this video, which we'll link to from the textbook. A couple of really interesting clips to watch. Okay.